the storm and winds may...
Hi, I'm Terry Townsend, minister here at the New Concord Church of Christ in New Concord, Ohio. I want to personally thank you for joining us today via this live stream. The purpose of this stream is to simply share the good news of Jesus Christ. While we appreciate you viewing this stream, this effort is in no way intended to be a substitute for the assembling together with the saints. We recognize, however, that there are circumstances that arise that might prevent someone from attending church service. And for this reason, we provide a means whereby people like you can hear the gospel preached. We hope you enjoy today's message from God's Word. Please feel free to share this stream. If you're ever in the New Concord, Ohio area, we'd love for you to drop by and visit with us. We meet every Sunday morning beginning at 9:15 a.m. for Bible class, again at 10 a.m. for worship, and again 6 p.m. for our evening worship. See you soon.
You hold me in your mighty arms, forever safe from harm.
Appreciate all of you being here this evening. Appreciate Kevin leading us in our singing this evening, and the last song that was sung, the first verse, there's much to do, there's work on every hand, ties in, he didn't know this, with what I want to talk about this evening. I have for a couple weeks on Sunday mornings been studying from the book of Nehemiah. So I want to study tonight from Nehemiah chapter 3. I'm not sure, I may have another lesson or two from Nehemiah in the next few weeks. I don't know for sure yet if I'll do it or not, but I do want to touch on this third chapter. Before I get there, however, I do want to mention something about our door knocking that we did yesterday. And some of you may be thinking, well, when's he going to shut up about the door knocking? Listen, I am never going to shut up about personal work. Okay, that's just who I am. It's what I believe we as God's people are required to do, to take the good news. We just sung it. One of the 4 verses to that song, right? Each one of them, there's work to do. They were talking about the hungry souls. The last verse talks about those lingering in, I forget how it's worded, but basically erring members. And so each one of us, as we sing those songs, I mentioned it this morning, we need to not only sing, but understand what we're singing. And we get more out of services when we do that, but we're teaching one another, and we were teaching each other, and actually all agreement as we sing these praises to God, saying we've got things that we are responsible, I'm responsible for doing, and part of that is going out and sharing the gospel with a lost and dying world. Also, trying to help those who are struggling. Let me say this real quickly before I mention this. We have some here, and every congregation has it. We have some here who are struggling with their faith. You can see it. They're sporadic in their attendance. A lot of them aren't here tonight. I know some of you have come up to me and asked me about either brother or sister so-and-so that hadn't been here for weeks. Okay? And let me just encourage all of us to think about and look around and see ones maybe you hadn't seen in a while and send them a card or a note this week. Not only pray for them, but do something for them. Send them a card, a text, whatever. I try to do that every week via the telephone, the cell phone, send them a text or Facebook, send them a private message through Facebook or a personal visit. I try to do all those things. It seems like with the younger generation, they seem to respond better when I do it through social media. And so I do that a little bit. And I usually get a text back appreciating the fact that I thought about them and stuff. And I really do. I'm concerned about these people. I don't want them lost. I don't want anybody lost. And so spend some time this week reaching out to folks. But as far as our door knocking, it was the first annual. So I'm going to guess from the first annual that there'll be a second and third and fourth. House to house, heart to heart. The publication that we send out in New Concord area. The congregation there, Matt Wallen is his name. Matt Wallen is he works for House to House, Heart to Heart. I'm not exactly sure what his title is. I think he's the one that kind of spearheaded this. And over the last 6 months, I could have done a better job maybe promoting this from the pulpit. That's kind of my fault. It kind of slipped up on me. But anyway, there were 550 plus congregations. I sent Matt a text this morning. I asked him how many congregations were involved in this nationwide. He sent me a text back this afternoon, and he says, as of this afternoon, 550-ish, ISH. 550 plus congregations that he knows of were involved in it. Now, some of you may have saw the Facebook picture of the 8 of us that went out. I didn't do that to make anybody feel bad. We were asked to do it. Matt sent out a message, said we want pictures on social media. We want to flood social media. We also want you to send it to us. I finally figured that out after about an hour yesterday, how do I send this picture off my phone to his email? I'm still learning, but I did figure it out. I don't know if I could do it again, but I did get it to go through. And he asked questions, how many went, what kind of responses did you get? Let me just tell you, we knocked over 100 doors, the 8 of us. We went out 2 by 2. Isn't that biblical? We went out 2 by 2, and we hit Main Street. We hit this road back here. There was 2 that went back here, and the other 3 groups went down Main Street, 1 on the right, 2 on the right, 1 on the left, and we hit as many homes as we could in about 2 hours and 15, 20 minutes. It was a beautiful day for door knocking. Now, some of you ask, well, what did we get any responses? I didn't meet anybody today that was here as a visitor that we had knocked personally on their door. But we mentioned to the group when we got back yesterday, my dad made a few comments, and I made a few comments that we may not see right now any responses, but I do believe the Word says, my Word, God says, will not come back void. And I do believe through our efforts, through our works, we will be blessed. If nothing else, the 8 of us that got together yesterday, we had a great time. We really did. We bonded. We grew together as a group. And we got out in this community and knocked doors. Like I said, over 100 doors, maybe 40, 50 doors out of the 100 plus that we knocked, they actually opened their door. I was a little discouraged because there were just, I don't know, Sherry, 30% of the people we knocked opened their door. I don't know if it's because of my face, what it was. They were scared of me. I mentioned that in Bible class. But maybe 40 to 50% of the people. So we didn't get everybody. We got about half. This is how we did it. I mentioned this Wednesday night. We just knocked on their door. We'd introduced ourselves. We're so-and-so. We're with the New Concord Church of Christ. I had one. By the way, there's not many left because we used some of them yesterday, the house to house, heart to heart, and many of them took the paper. But we had the paper with us, and we said, we're the ones that were responsible sending this out. You get this. I was actually shocked. We had 2 or 3 said they did not get it here in town. So I'm not sure if they're on a post office. I'm not either that or they just throw junk mail. They consider it junk mail. It's not junk. It's a beautiful paper. But maybe they throw it away. I don't know. I did hear there was a group on the other side of Main Street, Don and Delbert. And Sherry and I were on the left, and I did hear the lady say, and I even told Sherry, listen to that. She did tell Don and Delbert, oh yeah, I get that paper. I love that paper. I love reading that paper. So there was a couple comments of people that do get the paper that appreciate getting that each and every time it's sent out. So that was encouraging, and that was one of the reasons why. Don, was that you and Delbert that got the lady that responded?
Yeah, and then one lady didn't get it, and
I got that information. We had one or two that would like to get the paper for one other reason. They're not getting it. I thought everybody in town got it, but apparently not everybody's getting it. And so we'll work on that. We did take names, prayer requests. That was another thing that shocked me. When we did this in Alabama, we caught about 65 to 70% people at home. And almost everybody, we didn't have nobody that went yesterday said any negative thing about anybody treating them harshly. There was no doors slammed in our face. I didn't even experience a dog. Now, I did find out down Main Street there's more cats than there are dogs. We had a lot of cats, didn't we? Cats don't bother me. The dogs sometimes do. I think we had one dog that came to the door. Remember the big historic house right here? The master of the home was not home, and that dog, I thought, was going to break down the glass door. But it looked like a friendly dog. But anyway, that's what we did. There was a group over in Greenville, Ohio, just north of Dayton. A former member where I used to preach at Northridge, that's where they're going now. They let me know, and they actually door knocked. I think there was 10 or 12 from that small congregation that went door knocking. They actually went out for several hours. They knocked over 550 doors. And Ken and he took a child with him. The two of them knocked 80 doors themselves. But they were out almost all afternoon. Now, we'll see what happens. We pray. We need to pray about it. I'll have in the next week or two the names of those who requested prayer. We didn't have a lot, but we had a few. I'll mention either this Wednesday night or next Wednesday night, and we'll pray for these individuals. We won't have to take a whole service to do that because we didn't have many. But there will be a follow-up letter to those who did ask for that. We got their addresses. And there was also one family, I'm guessing they had just moved into the area or are disgruntled wherever it is they're attending. They are looking for a new church home. And I will follow up with them before the end of this week. They will get a knock on the door from me. And maybe, hopefully, that'll lead to something good. So I want to give you kind of an update on that. We're going to do this again. I know we did it for Family Bible School. And next time we do it, we're going to try to hit different doors. We've not hit all the doors in this area. There's so many opportunities there. And so I appreciate all of you for your prayers, those of you who participated. And like I said, we'll continue to do those good works. Now, Nehemiah chapter 3. I've mentioned this chapter on several occasions, alluded to it. It's just a list of names. It's a list of individuals who had either come earlier, either the first or second wave that had returned back to Jerusalem following the years in captivity, Babylonian captivity, or those who had come back this third and final wave with Nehemiah. But it's a list of these individuals, the leaders of these families, and different locations along the wall. Now, the wall of Jerusalem was down. It was the gates were burned, stones and stuff. I mean, I can't remember what chapter it is, maybe chapter 4, where the Geshem and Tobiah, them who were the enemies, made kind of a crude comment that, wow, even a fox could jump over this and destroy it. It was that bad a shape. And people were a little discouraged. I mean, here they were. This is many, many years had elapsed since Cyrus had issued a decree for God's people to return home. And many things had taken place, good changes, but the walls were still in bad shape. And so Nehemiah's responsibility, his number one task, was to get the walls back up, secure and stable. And so chapter 3, you're given a list of these individuals, where they're located along the wall, which gates. One of these days we'll take time to study the different gates. There's a lot of lessons that can be learned from the different gates in and around the city of Jerusalem. But they're there for location purposes, so we kind of get an idea about where they were stationed. And Nehemiah, he takes the leadership role. He delegates authority. Each person is now motivated and challenged to take part in this good work. Each person did what they could. Families were involved. And many of them, and in this lesson, we're looking at the fact that each in front of his own home. The statement in one translation, each in front of his own house. Several times is mentioned, or at least alluded to, in this chapter. Nehemiah understood the importance of the home. And if he could get people who owned homes, who had property near this particular part of the wall, and got them working on that portion of the wall closest to where they lived, he understood that they're going to give their best effort, because they don't want that portion of the wall weak to where an enemy could come in and attack. Now, I use this as a springboard to talk about the home or the church, but the home in particular. Because it's no secret that the American home is in disarray. In fact, not only as we think about homes without us tonight, I'm talking about even homes within the church. Families within the family of God are struggling, are having problems. And so this lesson is meant to encourage us as families of one family, the family of God, to help us strengthen, to stabilize, and to solidify not only our faith, but our homes. So if you're taking note, I don't have PowerPoint tonight. One of the first things I note in this chapter is this, and this is how I like to word it. And I've kind of used this point, I think, in other lessons, but it's true, and it's this: we will never be effective at cleaning up the filth abroad until we first remove the mess within. Think about it. We look out and we watch the media. And I don't know about you, I get sick and tired of watching media, but I still turn it on because, and you look out and you see all the mess abroad. You know, you got this shooting over here and this shooting over here, and all these problems that are going on. And you go, and a lot of times we say, boy, if our government would just do that. Or if this would just take place. But you know what? We can't fix the problems all around us until we clean up the mess right here at home. Does that make sense? Now, don't get me wrong, we need to do what we can to encourage and help those abroad, but we really need to concentrate on cleaning up ourselves first. And I think that's what's being taught here in Nehemiah chapter 3, that while the entire wall around the city was torn down and lied and rubble and stuff, Nehemiah says, you know what, I've got to get people, each one in front of their own house, just cleaning up their mess first. If we get this home, and then this home, and then this home, and then this home over here, and each one of them doing their own part, cleaning up their own mess around their own house, then eventually we'll get the entire wall built. And you know what? They did it in 52 days. Without government red tape, I get it. You know, a lot of times it takes 52 days just to get a permit in our country to do something of a physical structure. But they didn't have the modern equipment that we have today, but they had a determination, they had a mind to work, each understood their responsibility, and so they began working right there in front of their home. Now we read in this chapter where there were some that were finishing their job. They were getting their work done close to where they were first responsible, getting that work done. And then later on, you'll read in like verse 4 and then verse 21, I believe it is, where a guy's working and then he goes and helps others do work. And so they were getting their job done and then not quitting, not stopping, saying, well, my job's done, that's it. They were then going and helping others. What a lesson for us today. But this first point is cleaning up the mess within. You know, community leaders often organize cleanup days. You'll see it here in town, or certain days groups will clean up the highway, go down through. And I know in certain towns, certain cities I've been in during this time of year when the leaves fall, there's a community clean up the leaf day. And so you'll begin right there in your home. And people will be out raking their leaves, and the smell of burning leaves in the fall, I like that, even though it's not good on my allergies. But it all starts at home. And when Hurricane Katrina hit down in Louisiana several years ago, it took a while, but once New Orleans residents were able to go back to assess the damage, and there was great damage there. Where did those folks begin? They went back home and started cleaning up the mess there at home. There's a lot of mess at home. There's a lot of mess within our hearts, people's hearts today, that needs some cleaning up. We're often quick to find fault with others. You know, I don't know if that's just human nature or just the way we are, but we'll find fault with other people, but all the while we fail to see our own shortcomings. This person's got a lot of mess in their life. This person over here's got a lot of mess in their life. Look at them. Can you believe that? Matthew chapter 7, ring a bell? You remember what Jesus said? Judge not that you be not judged. The hypocritical judgment that many have. And then he talks about, first remove the beam. That large beam that's in your own eye before trying to remove the speck that's in your neighbor's eye. Oh, I like that passage because that's the way it is many times. Is we want to clean up abroad. We want to cast or throw stones at people. Look at the mess that they're in when we've got large beams in our own eyes. We've got our own problems, and so I think the first thing we need to do is examine ourselves. Nehemiah chapter 3 teaches us this, and begin working right here within ourselves. Ourselves first, our hearts. Spreading out then to our homes, our families. We'll criticize many times the behavior of a neighbor. Maybe I've got good neighbors. I really can't be too critical of the neighbors around me. They're all wonderful. They really are. I don't deserve such good neighbors. In fact, some of us are getting ready to plan to go out to eat one of these days. I just think that's wonderful. But sometimes maybe you live in a neighborhood where you've got some neighbors that aren't so nice, and you begin to criticize them, and you overlook your own failures and faults. We'll accuse others of being hypocritical. I hear it all the time. Members of the church that don't attend anymore because, there's just that church, that congregation is full of hypocrites, when they themselves are guilty of saying one thing and doing the other. And so we need to be careful. Galatians 6, beginning at verse 4, says this. And I'm going to read from the Amplified version. The Amplified Bible is just I've got one in my office. It's kind of neat. It'll take words and it'll give you 2 or 3 words added to it. Where you have one word in the King James, it'll take the Greek word and will give you 2 or 3 words that go along with it. All right, so I'm not saying it's a great translation. It's just an interesting read. But here's what the Amplified version says in Galatians 6, beginning at verse 4. But let every person carefully scrutinize and examine and test. See, there's 3 words there. Let every person carefully scrutinize and examine and test his own conduct and his own work. He can then have the personal satisfaction and joy of doing something commendable without being boastful comparison with his neighbor. For every person will have to bear his own load. We need to take a close look at ourselves, and before, again, cleaning up everybody else's mess, pointing out everybody else's problems, let's clean up our own. And I think the same can be said within the church. Not just individually, but collectively. Yeah, there's problems within the church. We have our problems here at New Concord. Nothing we can't overcome. God says through Him we can do anything. But we have our problems. And we have to, when those problems arise, we need to deal with them. We need to fix them to the best of our ability. Acts chapter 6. In fact, you got Acts 6, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and Revelation chapter 3, beginning of verse 1, gives us examples of first century congregations who had problems. The Jerusalem church, soon after it was established on the day of Pentecost, I don't know how many years from Acts 2 to Acts 6, several years possibly, but the church was growing and multiplying. There's thousands of members of the body of Christ, Christians, there in and around Jerusalem in the first century. They were being blessed, they were growing, they were prospering, they were following the apostolic doctrine, which is the doctrine of Christ. There were people being added to the church daily, those who were being saved, Acts 2 verse 47. They were enjoying common meals together, Acts 2:46. They were meeting in the temple daily and studying God's Word. You got to appreciate the attitudes and hearts of these first century Christians. But in Acts 6, guess what? With all that good, there was still some negatives. A problem arose with the Grecian widows. They were being neglected in the daily ministration of food. They felt as though their people, the Hellenists, were being overlooked. And that happens within the church sometimes. We get our feelings hurt, and sometimes it does happen where you've got one group of people, maybe not because of any fault of their own and attempting to do it, but it's just the way it is. Maybe they're more active, more involved, and you've got a group over here that may not be as active, as involved, and it feel as though this group over here is overlooking them. That's the problem. So we've seen that. And so what happened was, because of this, the apostles had to stop momentarily to deal with the problem. They had to stop their chief rule, that was to pray and to evangelize, to deal with this problem, and they dealt with it. They took men of their own group that was complaining about it. Choose you out 7 men of honest report who will oversee this affair. You've got a problem? Okay, we're going to give you that problem, and you're going to be the ones to deal with it. I think there's a great lesson there for us. A lot of the times, the problems that arise within the church, we need to give the people that are causing, or at least thinking they've got the problem to deal with themselves. And that's what's going on, and so they do that, and the Bible says, and the apostles went back, and then you begin reading about as soon as the problem was resolved, the church now begins to really multiply and grow. The point is, there are problems, there are messes within the church that arise from time to time, and we've got to deal with it. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, you had sexual immorality within a congregation. And it happens. It happened in the first century, and so it had to be dealt with, and it was. In Revelation chapter 3, out of the, 7 churches of Asia Minor that are listed there, 5 of the 7, there's I love the Apostle Paul and I love John. I love these first century, these apostles who wrote, these inspired men, because they start out kind of bragging people up, making you feel good. Then they lower the hammer on you. It's like, okay, now here's some things you got to deal with. Here's some things you got to work on. And notice out of the 7, 5 are listed here as having some problems. The church at Ephesus, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Laodicea. Laodicea was lukewarm. And if they would have continued that course, he said God was going to spew that church out of his mouth. That's something that God will not tolerate, is lukewarm Christianity. We've got to clean up the mess. Individually, it starts with me, my heart, my life, my family then. I've got to work on my family. I've got to do better. And then congregationally, let's get in there and do what we can. If there are problems, let's fix it. And when we do that, then we can start focusing on those without. Which leads to point number 2. There are numerous repairs within the home in need of immediate attention. Homeowners know that. Maintenance, upkeep on a home is constant. I love my home. I've mentioned I love my house. I'm thankful that Brenda found us that house. I tell you what, I couldn't have picked a better house. They knew exactly what I wanted. But you know what? The other week, I had 2 or 3 things break all in the same week. I had a light went out. I've told you this. I had the air conditioner quit working. It was 95 degrees that day. When it don't go out when it's 40. It goes out when it's hot. Furnace don't go out when it's 90. It goes out when it's 20 below, right? All that happened within 2 or 3 days. I'm like, But you know what? We dealt with it. There are repairs physically within our homes. We understand there's general cleaning that needs to be done, painting from time to time. I've got a back deck that's going to need painted either this fall or maybe I'm going to wait till next spring. I don't know which. Always something to do. Spiritually speaking, the American home is a disaster area in many respects. It's in need of repair. There are marriages today in need of mending. Ephesians 5, beginning at verse 21, Jesus dealing with Christ, the head of the church, the Savior of the body, brings in the marriage relationship. And I really do believe we've probably not even really scratched the surface on what he's saying there in Ephesians 5. You get down to verse 31 through about verse 32 or 33, the love and respect factor there, those two things. What is it that husbands need most? What is it that wives, women need most? Jesus, and most of your people, that counselors and people like that study these things, have concluded this is what men need, this is what women need most. It's right there in Ephesians chapter 5. The Lord knows all. He knew it from the very beginning. He made us. And we've got to get our marriages back the way. We've got to put God in the center of our home. He's got to be number one. You know, I've often, and I've just described it this way before you, and you've heard it from other preachers. You've got a triangle. You've got the husband on one end, and the bottom, and the wife on the other, and God at the top. And the closer each gets to God, the closer they get to one another. I do believe that. Now, that's not to say you're not going to have marital problems. You will. All of us that have been married have had problems. We were teasing today at the hospital. Zach was there, and you know, he's engaged now, and so Jim McMasters was there, and we were just kind of picking on him a little bit about, you know, marriage and stuff, but when it was all said and done, I said, you know what, I love my wife more now than I ever have, and that's really the way it should be. We should be getting closer to one another. And we've had our problems. She's not here to defend herself. It's more me than it is probably her most of the time. But there are marriages that need mended. America's ambassador to Japan, Douglas MacArthur II, several years ago, served as counselor of the State Department under John Foster Dulles. This is an illustration I found. This is what it said. Like Dulles, MacArthur is a hard worker. Once when Dulles telephoned the MacArthur home asking for Doug, Miss MacArthur mistook him for an aide and snapped irritably saying, MacArthur is where MacArthur always is. Weekdays, Saturdays, Sundays, and nights in that office. Within minutes, MacArthur got a telephone order from Dulles. Go home at once, boy. Your home front is crumbling. Think about that. We've got homes, we've got marriages that are in need of mending. Maybe it's time for husbands and wives to take a little break and get home. Toddlers in need of training. Our young people. I love our young people. I mentioned this morning one of those things to do is we need to come with the mentality that we're going to encourage one another. And all of you, every one of you here encourages me in one way or another. I could go around the room and point out each one of you tonight in different ways you encourage me, and I appreciate that. But you know what? Boy, our young people. I mention Kylie all the time. Kylie hadn't been... Tracy's been sick for a couple weeks, so Kylie's not been able to be with us. One of the first ones to meet me today was Kylie, and I had to have a big hug from her. One thing about our young people, and I saw it this morning, had all the bar kids here. There was a good number of young people here this morning. And as I'm coming through the hallway, and all the bars are coming off the bus and running to class, and you know, just all of our youth, the little ones, they're like, you know, I said this morning, David said, I was glad when they said, let us. Every one of them was like excited and couldn't wait to get to Bible class. That speaks volumes relative to our Bible class teachers. But it also speaks volumes relative to the hearts of little kids. Don't you wish all of us and more individuals, more Christians had the hearts of these? No wonder Jesus put one in his midst and said, unless you become like one of these. We need to have that kind of excitement, but in an American home, we see so many toddlers, so many kids, that disrespect kids have. We talk about disrespect within our youth. today. Well, we want to, this kid's unruly, this kid this kid that. You know what? It's parents' fault. Let's just be honest. It all starts with the parents. And so we need parents, husbands and mothers and fathers and wives, working together, raising and training our children. We think about disputes in need of dissolving. We've got disputes going on with this family member or this family member, and you just need to do like Abram and go to Lot and say, you know what, this is what we're going to do. Work those differences out. Attitudes in need of adjusting. How many times have you needed an attitude adjustment? Well, sometimes that needs to be done. Or priorities in need of prioritizing. We've got our priorities all mixed up in this world today. Even members of the church. Again, Nehemiah says, here's our priority number one. Well, Ezra comes back and there's a renewal, a revival, if you will, getting back to the Word. That's first and foremost. Nehemiah comes on the scene in Nehemiah chapter 8. They're going to build him a pulpit of wood. That's going to be done again. But also the priority now is, okay, now we've got to build the walls. We've got to get our priorities in order. We've got so many things distracting us. We've got this church and spiritual things. Seems like it takes the back burner many times to all these other things going on in our lives. I'm thankful that my parents are still alive and they're here. They're members here now, and I appreciate that. And they don't like, just like my wife, she got on me today because I talked about her. And, I'm not supposed to do that as a preacher, but I'm going to brag up my parents for a minute. And I know they'll get on me later, and that's okay. But I'm thankful to have been raised in a home where church Christ was number one. I mean, we never missed services. There were times when ball games were going on, and guess what? We had to bring our ball uniforms to church. We had changed into them on a Wednesday night because a lot of times in the summertime, ball games, Little League, was played at 8, 9 o'clock at night. And as soon as church was over, then we went to the ball game. We may have been an inning or two late, but they taught me something. They were laying a foundation there. Here's our priorities. And if you're living under my roof, and this is where I've got to do a better job as a father, listen, this is the rules. And as long as you're under my roof, Jesus Christ and His church are going to be first and foremost. And so we got all these problems. I think about Mary and Martha. Martha was doing good things, and we do many great things, but many times we're not doing the best thing. And Jesus gets on her and says, you're cumbered about, you're all anxious and worked up about really nothing. For Mary's chosen the good part. She's doing, Mary wasn't serving. She was sitting at the Lord's feet, listening to His every word. The spiritual Jesus Christ has to be number one. Now, as we close out, strong homes, number 3, make for a strong community. In one of my study books, An Exposition of the Bible, volume number 2, in reference to Nehemiah 3, here's what it said, and I quote, "Surely there is no principle of organization so simple or so wise as that which directs us to work near home in the first instance. With the Jews, this rule would commend itself to the instinct of self-interest. Nobody would wish the enemy to make a breach opposite his own door of all places. Therefore, the most selfish man would be likely to see to it that the wall near his house was solidly built." Nehemiah understood that principle. If we're going to make the wall as strong as it possibly can be, then let's put families, homes, working on that wall closest to them. They're going to give it their best. They're going to put forth the best effort. They're going to make it as strong as possible. Why? Because they don't want the enemy to breach that portion of the wall closest to their house. Proverbs 12 verse 7 says, "The wicked are overthrown and are not, but the house of the righteous, that house shall stand." A community, a church, a nation is only as strong as the families, the homes that are within it. That's true in our community. That's true within the church. Proverbs 10 verse 30, "The righteous will never be removed, but the wicked will not dwell in the land." Hezekiah was told to set his house in order just prior to his death. Isaiah 38 verse number 1. As we close out, what about us? Is our home in order? Is there debris that needs removing? If so, tonight we give you an opportunity to remove that debris. It begins by giving your life to the Lord in obedience to His will. Be baptized into Christ for the remission of sins. He'll add you to His kingdom, the church. Be faithful unto death, and you shall receive the crown of life. If we can assist you tonight in your obedience to the gospel, come now, together we stand as we sing.